Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with great artist, Bad Day. Oh, and what a bad day this one is. It's Jean Martinon, whose praises I have been singing like crazy since I started this channel. And he is marvelous. But here, with the Paris Conservatory Orchestra, one of my favorite bands, the two of them managed to destroy Prokofiev's Fifth Symphony, originally for Decca. Let me see what the date of this thing was. It was like 1960, actually. It was fairly early. It was before Martinon's career really took off, making records for RCA and later for Errato or Warner or whatever it was. I mean, this was his early Decca period. And I've said this before, I've talked about this. There was a Decca set, which is like way out of print. But he did some wonderful things for Decca. He really did. But he also did some lousy things for Decca. And I think this series is kind of salutary. It's important because no matter how much we love somebody, they have their good days and their bad days. Nobody is perfect. And nobody is so great that they're beyond criticism. That is one of the things that we should have learned from the fact that all of the basic repertoire has been recorded 100 billion times on, billions of different labels. So we can compare. And, people, when I do these talks, people who are fans of certain artists, of course, have a conniption, and they send me hate mail and hate comments and whatnot. And I'm always amazed by that. I mean, why should these people be necessarily any better than anybody else? They have their bad days. And we need to recognize that. And we need to discuss them, and we need to be open about it, because you're going to spend money. You're going to go buy these things. And you shouldn't waste your time or your money on junk or on, off days, which can happen for any number of reasons. It could be either the repertoire was uncongenial, or the artists were dyspeptic, or the engineers were having a really awful time. Or any combination of those things. And, that's the nature of the business. It happens all the time. It's not a big deal. It really isn't. It's just something that we need to accept and get used to. And get used to this. If you don't have the Decca, you can probably get this Testament reissue. It's also coupled with the Seventh, which goes rather better, I must say. And it's interesting because Martino really had a feeling for Prokofiev, but he didn't make many good Prokofiev recordings. After these two recordings were done, in his later period, he did the complete symphonies and a bunch of other pieces for Vox. And those were French radio productions, and the performances are better. You can hear better what he's sort of getting at, but the playing of the orchestra is really second rate, and the sonics are just dim. They sound lousy, they really do. And so unfortunately, what should have been one of the great niches in the Martinon discography turns out to be a terrible disappointment, just about every place it turns up. And I wish it weren't the case, but that's really true. And I think I should warn you all, because if you get these other Martinon recordings, don't talk yourself into thinking that the horrible sound and indifferent playing that you're hearing is somehow better than it is. No, your ears do not deceive you. It's lousy. And in the case of this Prokofiev Fifth, well, the Fifth is, without a doubt, the most popular Prokofiev symphony after the classical, and it's the one that gets botched the most. It's incredible. How difficult is it to play a big climax with alternating crashes on the cymbals and the tam-tam and the whole thing? You would think it's like a no-brainer. But it just goes to show how we can't make assumptions, because 9 times out of 10, the big moments in these performances of this symphony are just dreadful. And they are particularly dreadful here. The Paris Conservatory Orchestra could be amazing, but their amazingness was often expressed in terms of their extremely characteristic sound. And that sound worked better for some music than for other music, and it did not work for Prokofiev. They just don't have the volume, the intensity, the power. The percussion is like somewhere else. This is an early stereo recording made in an acoustic environment that wasn't exactly conducive to the best sonic results. It's very similar to what happened with those Pierre Monteux Stravinsky recordings that I talked about. The the Petrushka and Rite of Spring, also with the Paris Conservatory Orchestra. I mean, they just weren't up to certain things. And when it comes to this kind of repertoire, they weren't. And Martino, who was, a conductor's conductor, he was a composer. He played things with a composer's eye and ear. With, clarity was his goal, and sensible tempos and just balances. He really needed, if he had done this stuff, for example, in Chicago, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I guarantee we would not be having this conversation. But it really is unfortunate. He was in France, and the Paris Conservatory Orchestra could have good days and bad days. And when they were bad, the greatest conductor in the world was not going to make them sound good. It just wasn't going to happen. French orchestras were notorious for being difficult to deal with, no matter who the conductor was. Even conductors they loved, they had their way of doing things, and it was their way or the highway. I mean, Vienna was like that too. It's not like, any of these large orchestras that have long traditions of performance are likely to be more interested in giving you their version than in giving you your version. So I don't know whether Martinon and the orchestra didn't get along, or whether this was exactly what Martinon wanted at the time. We have no way of knowing. All I can tell you is the results speak for themselves. It's a terrible Prokofiev Fifth Symphony. Absolutely dreadful. A void like death. But keep on listening nonetheless. Thanks for joining me. Take care.